Welcome Elina deSantos to the stage. Mother of the best person she knows, Megan Wright. She has directed Richard Fancy in 13 plays, and she's co-artistic director of Rogue Machine, but she's best known for saving Ron Batita's son's life, my son Daniel, with her excellent diagnostic skills acquired during a routine visit to the vet with her cats. And that's the truth. Ladies and gentlemen, Elina deSantos.
Tickle is torture. My torturer was my brother, Keto, 2 years my junior and half my size. I was big for my age, towering over my kindergarten class as if I were an adult. It didn't make me feel powerful, just too big. Keto's favorite activity, from as long as I can remember, was to jump on me, tickle, and punch me alternately as often as he could. If I retaliated, he just went harder and faster. My father was a dictator, aptly nicknamed Rex. His commanding European accented boom ruled the deSantos home. During a particularly savage Keto attack, my dad shouted us into the kitchen. Rex's rage made me feel small and not in a good way. As we cowered before my father, Keto's ferocity dimmed. We could die at that moment. Keto hit me, I offered. Rex's arm flew up, back to backhand my brother. Touch your sister again, and his arm kept swinging out. Raf mit dir. He was done with us. Safely out, Keto poked me, whispering, there, I touched you. He touched me! He touched me! Keto touched me! My dad flew through the swinging door, arm up to send Keto across the room. I lied! He didn't touch me! I lied! And Rex turned backhand now at me. I stopped breathing. He held that arm up for a long time. It was unbearable. Rex never actually hit me in my 15 years living with him, but from that moment on, I knew he could. Keto waited for Rex's exit, triumphant. He jumped on me, punching and tickling me to silent tears. No sound, no fight, silence. The best I could do from that day forth was to stay clear of Keto. Never thwart him, never say no. We were 5 and 7. My father lived till we were 13 and 15. To children, 8 years is an eternity. My earliest memory of my mother was finding her in the bathroom crying silently. I didn't understand it, but I learned to do what my mother did. The truth is, our childhood was like living in a war zone, and my brother was the victim of it as much as I. He was a cute, wily child who was the first to read the telegram from Spain the day my father died. It was left in the door. Keto was the first one home from school that St. Patrick's Day. For me, that day began with a kidding remark to my mom about wearing orange to school to pay homage to my dad, who'd been on a business trip to Spain for a month. Rex had us believing, like all good dictators, that everything of any symbolic importance was about him. St. Patrick, he proclaimed, was actually Spanish, sent from Spain to rid Ireland of the snakes. So, somehow, wearing the anti-Catholic color of orange was the way to declare allegiance to Spain. To him. Crazy, yes. I was euphoric coming home that March 17th because Chuck Craig had told me that I had cute knees in art class. He had never even acknowledged my existence, let alone speak to me, but I was nearly skipping as I approached the house. As I opened the door, I heard and saw a woman screaming, not my mother, but a woman not allowed in our house. It was my sister-in-law, Marie. Daddy forbade her and my older half-brother to ever be in our house. My mother would never break that rule while Rex was away. Why is she here? What's going on? Where is my mother? And I heard her scream, "Your father's dead! Your father's dead!" as my cute knees collapsed beneath me. The king had died in his homeland, in a hotel not far from the small fishing village where he was born 69 years earlier. My brother and I were my father's third family. Rex had 2 sons with his first wife, and a daughter and a son with a woman he never married. And then my mom was 20 years younger than Rex, was taken by his European charisma. After all, he spoke 8 languages and was at the top of his entrepreneurial success when they met. However, my mother, Noni, learned quickly being married to the king was not the dream she'd imagined or had been promised. The steel export business that had made him millions collapsed, and most of my childhood was seeing my father try to be successful again. Although this last business trip seemed to be working toward success with importing Spanish furniture to the States, his death left us broke. I always feared my brother's rage, but death lay in my father's hands. Quito, my mother, and I had dreaded the wrath of my father's end. We knew of his omnipotence. He was the ultimate controller and would have taken us with him if he'd known he was going to die on that trip. My earliest memory of my father was of him saving me from the undertow at Jones Beach. Ironic. Growing up, Rex was the undertow, pulling me under to drown with him while alive and after his death. Strangely, with my father gone, Quito didn't become less threatening. He continued his father's reign, but now it was verbal, not physical. He teased me mercilessly, with rancor, with a need to make me feel less by making fun of my size and awkwardness. He was funny. Quito was funny. Everyone thought he was cute and comical. I was serious and a clumsy teenager. And my mom was charmed by my brother, just as she had been charmed by my dad. The worst thing was that Quito knew that I was afraid of him. He knew that he had power over me. Some years later, Noni, my mom, took me, Quito, and my 8-year-old daughter, Megan, to Spain, to where Rex was born and buried. The first night that we were in Santiago de Compostela, the city where he died, we went to dinner, and the waiters at the restaurant talked about my father as if he had been royalty. "Oh, Augusto, magnificent, más grande que la vida." How had they remembered him? It was nearly 20 years since he had died, right in that little town. We marveled at Rex's imprint and how these men revered him. My mother got quiet, almost in a whisper. She began to describe how my dad had beaten her when she was pregnant with me. They had gone to dinner and fought on the way home. She insisted on getting out of the car and walking home. Rex followed her, eventually forcing her back into the car, taking her home, throwing her into a bathtub, and threatening her with a shotgun after he'd beaten her. I was shocked, but I knew it was true. I flashed that early memory of finding my mom in the bathroom crying. Later that evening, Quito and I met for a drink. I expressed my horror at my mother's confession, to which Quito's answer was, "Well, there are 2 sides to every story." In that moment, I knew I had to change my story. Megan's father, Al, was on the face of it nothing like my father or brother. Yet there was a rage covered by alcohol, a common thread in my family, that was familiar and disturbing. I was the groomed codependent, always ready to please, find ways to control the uncontrollable, and submit to the tyranny of articulate wit, and he had it. After all, my brother and father had trained me well. 2 years after the trip to Rex's homeland, I said no to my husband and my brother. Something had happened in Spain. I was in the center of 3 generations of females who were enamored of and terrorized by men they adored. It was clear that I was like my mother. I had married an alcoholic 20 years my senior, as she had. The question was, would I continue the legacy? The legacy of charisma that Rex had left in Spain was alluring. It was how I liked to remember my father, not the way he was. I knew I had to leave Megan's dad, but I couldn't seem to do it. I was afraid. How would I survive? How could I be without these men that completed me? It was realizing that saying no would be life-giving for Megan that convinced me to act. My beloved daughter would not have to endure terror or tickle if I broke the codependent cycle. So I left Al for Megan's sake. 2 months after Megan and I moved out from my husband's house, Keto called to schedule Megan to join him on his yearly ski trip. I said no. I told him that I didn't trust him, that I knew that he could not help but badmouth me to her on that trip. I explained that it was a precarious time for his 10-year-old niece. I wanted to protect her from his spew. It was in his DNA. His response was uncensored, screaming rage. How dare you take my family from me? You will pay for this. He sounded just like Rex. I have always believed that Keto was the one who chose not to speak to me some 20 years ago, that it was he that cut me out. But the truth is, I no longer wanted to be tickled, to be tortured.